Hello everybody. Welcome to Creating the Basic Adaptable Game Engine Library, Part 46, Meta Actions. In previous videos, we've learned how to create some really basic actions. Remember, actions refers to an object containing code that's automatically applied to a sprite over time. For example, we have actions which will move a sprite by a certain amount over a certain time interval, or rotate a sprite by a certain amount, or cause it to fade out over a certain amount of time. However, there are some limitations to the action class at present. For example, all actions happen at the same time, which can be great if you want to both move and rotate a sprite. However, maybe you want to move the sprite in one direction, then rotate it, and then move it in another direction. So a meta action could be, for example, performing a list of actions in sequence. Or maybe a meta action could be something like repeating a given action a certain number of times. And so this is the goal of this video. We'd like to create some code for these so-called meta actions. One that allows us to repeat a single action a total of n times, one that will allow us to repeat an action forever, and then finally a meta action which allows us to perform a list of actions in sequence rather than in parallel, which is the default way actions are processed. So that's the idea for this video. Let's go ahead and open up our development environment. So here we are, and we're going to do mostly work in the action class right now. So again, in the action class, we have a lot of nice functions that will do some very simple actions for us. Right? We have move by, we have rotate by, and we have fade out. So after this bit of code, we're going to go ahead and create some meta actions. Right? And those, by meta, I mean the action will require other actions as parameters. In each one of these cases, it's going to be slightly more complicated because just of the way you have to process an action containing other actions. So first, maybe let's do public static action repeat. Right, that'll be used to repeat an action a certain number of times. So its parameters will be an action, which I'll call lowercase a action, and maybe an integer referring to the total number of times that action is going to be repeated. All right, so in this case, we're going to return a new action. Actually, I'm going to use the default constructor, right, because I actually need to override some things in this class. And within this action, I also need to add another parameter as well. Right, so I'm going to say int, we'll call this finished times. Right, how many times the action has finished. And then I actually need to override the apply method. Right, so I'll just write @override. That's a signal to the compiler saying, hey, I am in fact on purpose overriding a previously defined function. And that's actually going to be the apply function in this class. Right, for this special type of action, the apply function needs to be different. So the apply function just takes in a sprite called target and a double called dt for delta time. Right, let's say Boolean finished. Right, to check if something's finished, right, we're going to take the action and apply it to the target. We also need to tell it dt for delta time. Now, if it's finished, right, a repeat action is going to happen more than once. So if it's finished, we're going to go ahead and add 1 to the total number of finished times. Right, so let's go ahead and say maybe finished times increment by 1. And then we need to reset the action. Right, and this is something we wrote earlier. Right, resetting an action just sets the total time back down to 0 so it can start over again. Right, so finished times plus equals 1. Let's say action.reset. In this case, how do you know if an action is finished? We know that if the finished times, right, the number of times that it is actually run is equal to, double equals, is equal to the total number of times that we want it to run. In that case, the function is complete. All right, and I need a semicolon down here. Right, so again, to review this, to repeatedly run an action, right, a repeat action, the way you apply a repeat action is to, well, apply this action specified in the parameter, and then every time it's finished, increment by 1, and then the repeat action is finished when the number of times the action it's repeating is equal to this parameter total times. Right, so that's how we'll set up the meta action called repeat. Next, let's maybe turn our attention to the meta action that repeats something indefinitely, that will repeat something forever. And maybe we'll just call that one forever. A forever action never stops. So public static action forever. Right, this just needs to take in a certain action, and we don't need total times in this case because total times is forever. Again, we return a new action, and we have to override the function apply. Right, so public boolean apply sprite target double dt or delta time, and then again the code is actually going to look a lot like this. In fact, you could copy paste a bunch of this code, right? Except the difference is we're not keeping track of the number of finished times. Right, when you're finished, go ahead and reset it. When is this action completed? It's not. Right? It goes on forever. So we can actually return false. Right? This action never ends. So when this action is applied, if it's finished, reset it. And the forever action is never done. That is the nature of forever. All right. And that completes this meta action. I also really want to do the sequence action. Right, so let's go ahead and write that one next. Public static actions sequence. Right, this will take in a list of actions. I want to use the var args parameter here, action ... actions. Right, so you can put however many action objects you want as parameters here, and they'll be compiled into an array for your convenience. All right, so in this case, again, we're going to return a new action. Now, it just makes things a little bit easier to convert this array of action objects into a list of action objects. And so I'll say array list. I'll do that conversion first. This is an action list. That's going to be a new array list. I can see that I'm going to need to import that class, array list action. Now let me go ahead and import this first. Let's see, Alt Enter. Okay, and in this case, I want to take this array and convert it to a list, right? And then that list, I'm going to put that into an array list. So this is going to look kind of similar to the function that we used when we were copying the array list in the sprite class. Remember that from a couple of videos ago? Except in this case, we first have to convert this array to a list. Fortunately, the Java class arrays has a lot of really helpful methods for that. Specifically, I'm interested in arrays.atList. Right, that'll convert an array to a list. All right. See, maybe I'll put this on the second line so it's a little bit more readable. And I have to import this, of course. Import class. All right, so this creates a list for us to iterate over. That's going to be useful. And I need to keep track of where I am in the list of actions. Okay, this will be important when I choose which action from this list we're going to apply. So let's also create an int variable. We'll call it current index. This is which action we're going to apply. All right, it's time to override the apply method. So public boolean apply, just as we have with all the things in this video. So this is going to take a sprite target, a double value dt. First, let's get whatever action we should currently be running. And so action, I'll call that maybe current action, is equal to, from the action list, get the action at the current index. And that makes sense. Get the action that we want to apply. Boolean finished. Right, we're going to apply that action. So current action dot apply. Apply that to the target. Right, and if it's finished, we're going to want to move on to the next index. And so if finished, we can say current index plus equals 1. Right, how do we know that we're done with a sequence? Well, when the current index gets all the way through the list. Right, so in this case, we can say return current index, if that's equal to the size of the action list. In this case, it's kind of hard to guess because we can't really calculate a total duration very easily. So right, this is how we determine when a sequence of actions is finished, once we've progressed through every single one. Now, one interesting thing, right, this is something to think about, but that might be the case that you want to repeat a sequence of actions. Right? Imagine, for instance, a sprite which patrols back and forth. Right? So maybe you have something move a few units to the left, then it turns, and a few movements to the right, and then it turns, and a few to the left. And so that's performing a sequence, but we're repeating it. Right? So just in case you want to do something like that in your games, we also must override the reset action. Resetting a sequence is a lot different than resetting a normal action, because a sequence contains a whole list of actions. So we also need to override public void reset. I mean, it's not too bad. We just have to recognize that this is a task which needs to be accomplished. So we can just say for each action, called action in the action list, action.reset yourself. And then, to start back over, we need to set the current index back to 0. And that's how we can reset a sequence of actions. All right, so those are all very useful things. One more thing which might be useful to do in this case, now that we have a sequence action at our disposal, it makes sense to consider something like a delay. Right? For instance, you might want to move one sprite from one position to another, wait 2 seconds, and then go back to another position. I mean, in theory, you could accomplish delay by, say, rotating by 0 degrees over the course of 3 seconds. But the code would be a little bit cleaner if we just created a delay action. Again, this wouldn't have made sense. It wouldn't have been functional or useful without sequence. But let's create public static action delay. In this case, all we need is duration. Oh, and I want to spell this as delay. Okay. So this is a more standard action, not really a meta action. It's used in conjunction with meta actions, though. But we're going to return a new action. In this case, we can use the parameterized version of the constructor. So we're going to return a new action, say sprite target, double dt and double tt. Right? And my arrow notation, then we'll say, well, the delay action is done once the total time is greater than or equal to the duration of the delay. In this case, we don't even really need the target, but we have to follow the format for the function interface. All right. Again, that's a delay action, which should become pretty handy. All right. Now that we've got this, let's quickly see how we can use it in code. Right? Let's take those starfish, and instead of having them both spin and move, let's have them maybe move, spin, and move again. Right? Let's test all these different things out. So first, to the starfish collector class, let's start off. This is the part where we added actions before. Let's remind ourselves of what the starfish are currently doing. So code's compiling, right? So they move and spin, and then they stop. And so let's test out some of these new actions. And so maybe let's do a compound action. Let's say actions. Let's do spinning forever. So actions.forever. Action singular. And then this takes as a parameter an action. Let's do rotate by. Let's do 360 degrees in just a second. All right, and let's get this code a little bit indented. Right, a lot of white space, but I think it'll help us understand what's going on. Right, so for the starfish, we're going to add an action. It's a forever action. What do we want to do forever? We want to rotate 360 degrees over the course of 1 second, but we want to keep repeating that forever and forever. All right, and that's actually going to be a really quick rotation now that I think about it. As long as this keeps happening for more than 1 second, we know the code is successful. So, hey, look at those starfish go. They're spinning around and around and around. And so forever seems to be working. All right, let's try having the starfish do a sequence of actions. All right, so maybe instead of this, let's try something like action.sequence. And we'll have them maybe move to the left and move to the right. So action.moveBy. Let's move by 50 pixels to the right over the course of 2 seconds, followed by action.moveBy 50 pixels to the left for 2 seconds. All right, so this is a sequence of actions now. Right, action sequence will take a list of however many actions you wish. Right, so we should see them move to the right and then move to the left and then stop. Well, let's go ahead and give this a run. Right, so they're going to the right, then they're going to the left, then they stopped. Excellent. All right. So maybe for our last little test of the action classes, the action meta classes, let's have them go a little bit faster this time. And let's wrap up this sequence within a repeat. Right? Nesting actions can give you really cool results. Right? So we want to repeat this sequence of actions, and maybe we'll repeat it 3 times. Right, and again, I'm putting this on separate lines. Hopefully it becomes more readable. I'm not sure if this is more readable or not. And I'm not sure how to space this. Right, but what's happening here? So for the starfish, we're adding the following action. We want them to repeat this sequence of movements. Right, moving to the right and then moving to the left. We want to repeat that sequence 3 times. And if you want, again, the way that actions typically happen, you could even run this in parallel with another action. But let's test this. Let's see how this works. Right? If it works according to plan, we should see them go to the right and to the left a total of 3 times. Right? To the right, to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left. Okay? So I think this bit of coding was successful. Right? We've completed some meta actions. Again, there's even more actions we could create, and we'll do another batch of actions that are related to the screen in the next video. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.